Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're using this to fall asleep, get cozy, and relax, don't forget to subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Alright, let's get into the story. In the heart of Manchester, England, a chilling tale unfolded that would shock the United Kingdom and reverberate across the globe. This is the story of Reinhard Sinaga, a man who lived a double life, a diligent doctoral student by day and a predator by night, preying on unsuspecting men. Over the course of more than 2 years, he assaulted 206 men, earning the grim title of Britain's most prolific sex offender. To understand what really happened, let's travel back to 2017 and unravel this case from its very beginning. Manchester, located in the northwest of England, is a vibrant metropolitan borough in Greater Manchester with a storied history. As one of the world's earliest industrialized cities, it has evolved into the UK's second most prosperous city, trailing only London. At the core of Manchester lies Princess Street, a lively hub surrounded by the famous Chinatown, countless bars, clubs, and several universities. As night falls, students flock here to socialize, creating a pulsating nightlife. It was in this vibrant setting at 6 a.m. on June 2, 2017, that our story begins. Jerry, an 18-year-old amateur rugby league player, was jolted awake by excruciating pain coursing through his body. As consciousness returned, he found himself lying in a bed, his pants pulled down below his knees, and a man assaulting him. In a surge of panic, Jerry leapt from the bed and scanned his surroundings. He was in an unfamiliar room, standing face to face with a bewildered, naked stranger. Overwhelmed by physical and emotional agony, Jerry grappled with the realization that he, a proud and strong man, had been violated. Rage surged within him, a burning desire to reclaim his dignity. Using his skills as a tall, muscular rugby player, Jerry swiftly overpowered the smaller, weaker man. The assailant was defenseless, quickly reduced to a battered, bruised heap, lying motionless on the floor. Jerry called the police, but when they arrived, the scene confused them. They saw a petite man, severely injured and unmoving, while Jerry appeared unharmed. To the officers, it seemed clear the man on the ground was the victim. Consequently, Jerry was arrested on suspicion of grievous bodily harm. Despite his desperate pleas that he was the true victim, the police, relying solely on what they saw, dismissed his claims. "You're perfectly fine while he's knocked out cold. And you claim to be the victim," they scoffed. From an outsider's perspective, this was a tragic misunderstanding, but in that moment, Jerry was taken to the police station for questioning as the suspect. Meanwhile, the bruised man was rushed to Manchester Royal Hospital for treatment. Upon waking, his behavior raised red flags. He refused to cooperate with police inquiries and adamantly declined to unlock his phone for inspection. Under pressure from the officer's stern insistence, he relented, but in a fleeting moment of panic, he snatched the phone back, clearly desperate to conceal its contents. The police reclaimed the device and discovered a horrifying truth. It was filled with pornographic videos depicting the man before them assaulting unconscious men. The realization hit the officers like a thunderbolt. Jerry was indeed an innocent victim, and the injured man was the true culprit. The perpetrator was Reinhard Sinaga, born in 1983 in Sumatra, Indonesia. Hailing from a wealthy family, his father was a successful businessman who owned a private bank, affording Sinaga a life of luxury from childhood. Despite his privileged upbringing, Sinaga didn't rest on his family's fortune. He was diligent, graduating from the University of Indonesia in 2006 with a bachelor's degree in architecture. He then moved to the UK for further studies, arriving at the University of Manchester in August 2007. There, he swiftly earned a master's degree in urban planning in 2011, followed by another in sociology. Whether driven by a love for academia or an aversion to working, Sinaga began pursuing a PhD at the University of Leeds in August 2012, a journey that spanned 4 years. When he was caught, his first thesis submission had been rejected, and he was still refining it. Throughout his time in the UK, Sinaga lived comfortably, supported by his father's wealth. To those who knew him, he appeared refined, polite, and studious, with a prominent family background. Could such a man truly be a criminal? The investigation revealed a truth so shocking and malicious that it was unparalleled in the UK and rare worldwide. Police searched Sanaga's apartment, located near Princess Street, close to the vibrant bars in Manchester's gay village, a deliberate choice as Sanaga was openly gay. Inside, they found an arsenal of tools for his crimes, copious amounts of alcohol, various hallucinogenic substances, filming equipment, and storage devices for videos. The phone's videos revealed over 100 victims, all male, in states of unconsciousness. What baffled the police most was that, aside from Jerry, no other victims had reported assaults over this prolonged period. The videos confirmed 206 men, with only 136 identifiable. The remaining 70 were untraceable. The crimes dated back to at least 2015, possibly earlier, complicating evidence collection as many victims had left the area. Investigators embarked on a massive, time-consuming effort, contacting victims across England and beyond. Most were unaware of their violation until police reached out. Many believed they had simply overindulged in alcohol, with Sanaga posing as a kind stranger who cared for them. Some, due to family concerns, declined to cooperate with the police, a decision authorities respected. Ultimately, 48 victims chose to confront Sanaga in court. In the courtroom, Sanaga remained eerily calm, showing no remorse and often smiling. He refused to plead guilty, claiming all encounters were consensual. He insisted the men were fooling around after drinking, pretending to be asleep while secretly enjoying themselves. His defense grew increasingly absurd, alleging that all 48 accusers had propositioned him. The judge dismissed these far-fetched claims, and the victims knew Sanaga was lying. To dismantle his narrative, the police released the incriminating videos. Watching themselves being violated was agonizing for the victims, filling the courtroom with a heavy awkwardness. The footage captured snoring from many victims, directly contradicting Sanaga's claims of consent. Among the 48, the first victim was Tony, assaulted in 2015 at age 22. After drinking heavily at a club, he woke up in Sanaga's apartment, covered in vomit and feeling unwell. Thinking little of it, he thanked Sanaga for his apparent kindness. Sanaga boasted about his exploits on social media, writing, "Manchester is a magical city, a city of gay romance. Take a sip of my secret poison. It will make you fall in love." In January 2015, he assaulted a 19-year-old man who had argued with his girlfriend, giving Sanaga an opportunity to strike. Sanaga later bragged to friends about rescuing him from his girlfriend. On a weekend in September 2016, within 24 hours, he assaulted 2 men. One was 19-year-old Jack, who had been drinking heavily. After exiting a taxi, he met Sanaga, and they went to his apartment. The next morning, Jack awoke naked, with Sanaga explaining he had undressed him due to illness. When Sanaga made advances, Jack rejected them. To protect victims' privacy in the UK, aliases were used, and trials were conducted separately without media interference. Some victims waived anonymity, including Daniel, the first to do so. In 2015, celebrating his birthday, Daniel drank heavily. Planning to take a taxi home, he stepped into an alley to relieve himself and blacked out. He awoke in Sanaga's apartment, groggy, assuming he had overindulged. It wasn't until 2017, when police showed him the assault video, that he learned the truth. Daniel's experience mirrored most victims, who mistook physical pain for hangover symptoms, masking the violation. Police combined victim testimonies with surveillance footage to reconstruct Sanaga's method. He typically hunted after midnight, his apartment just minutes from the bar district. Sometimes, he encountered targets right outside his building. Surveillance showed him bringing someone home within a minute of stepping out. He targeted lone men, either collapsed from drinking or still standing. He'd approach, suggesting more drinks or a place to sober up, with a high success rate. Once in his apartment, victims were offered spiked drinks, rendering them unconscious. Sanaga tested their state before assaulting them, filming the entire process. The next day, he'd claim he had rescued them from the street. Victims, grateful, would leave unaware of the truth. In April 2017, a man reported waking in an Asian man's room, feeling dizzy. 2 days later, realizing he had been violated, he reported it but couldn't recall the suspect's appearance or address, leaving police without leads. It was Jerry's awakening during an assault that exposed Sanaga's crimes. The trial, spanning 2018 to 2020, saw Sanaga convicted of 159 counts of sexual offenses, receiving 88 life sentences. The judge declared, "In my view, you are a very dangerous, cunning, and deceitful individual. I hope you will never be released." His earliest parole opportunity is in 2060, at age 77, though the Crown Prosecution Service deems him Britain's most prolific sex offender. Globally, such a high number of male-targeted crimes was unprecedented, tarnishing Indonesia's image. Many Indonesians condemned Sanaga on social media, calling him a national disgrace and arguing his sentence was too lenient, though the UK's abolition of the death penalty made execution impossible. Victims voiced their pain. "Victim, I hope Sanaga spends the rest of his life in prison, not only for what he did to me, but for the harm he caused to many others, bringing immense pain and suffering." Victim B, "The day the police contacted me is one I'll never forget because it completely changed my life." Victim C, "I hope he slowly rots in prison, that he may feel the pain and torment I have felt. He destroyed my life." Sanaga's family was scarcely present. Only his mother attended one hearing, claiming ignorance of his sexuality and citing their devout Christian faith. His father later disowned him, saying, "I don't want to see him again or discuss this case anymore." Despite his church-going in the UK, Sanaga's friends described him as compassionate, making his crimes unimaginable. Indonesian classmates recalled him as intelligent and cheerful, with no hint of his later actions, suggesting he embraced his sexuality only in the UK's more open environment. This case prompted a surge in emergency calls from men in the UK, highlighting overlooked male safety concerns. It underscored a vital lesson. Both men and women must protect themselves in social settings, a sobering reminder of the dangers lurking in even the liveliest of nights. Betrayal rarely strikes like a bolt from the blue. It begins with small, insidious acts, hidden messages, flimsy excuses, fleeting encounters left unspoken. One person weaves a web of lies, savoring the illusion of freedom, while the other grows suspicious, scouring for proof. With each passing day, the need for control morphs into obsession. This is the story of how infidelity spiraled into catastrophic consequences, where jealousy fueled a thirst for destruction, and love twisted into manipulation. What began as a seemingly ordinary affair ended in a way no one could have predicted. In September 2023, a quiet suburban home became the stage for one of the most shocking and unforeseen events in recent history. The officers who responded to the call had no inkling that this case would unravel as more than just a violent crime. It was a meticulously orchestrated game where every player was merely a pawn. Nathaniel Ruiz Jr. was born around 1993 in one of Chicago's roughest neighborhoods, his exact birth date shrouded in the chaos of his early life. Raised in an environment where aggression and crime were woven into daily existence, Nathaniel showed signs of an impulsive, uncontrollable nature from a young age. In school, he clashed with teachers, fought with peers, and displayed little interest in academics. His first brush with the law came during his teenage years, caught in a robbery. As a minor, he escaped serious consequences, but it sparked a realization. The criminal world offered not just adrenaline but financial rewards. Over time, his offenses escalated. In 2016, he was arrested for assault, and in 2017, he faced charges for driving under the influence. Yet Nathaniel's true obsession was firearms. He amassed a collection of handguns, rifles, and ammunition, proudly showcasing them on social media. His fixation drew law enforcement's attention, leading to a court order banning him from owning weapons. Undeterred, Nathaniel continued acquiring arms through illegal channels. Despite his troubled past, Nathaniel sought legitimacy by launching a private security company. The venture was a sham, he lacked a license, and his legal restrictions barred him from carrying firearms. Still, he aggressively promoted his services online, posting images of himself in body armor, brandishing weapons with a swagger that belied his illicit operations. Linda Palomo, born on February 3, 1973, was a stark contrast to Nathaniel. By the time they met, she was an independent woman, a mother of 5 and a grandmother. Raised in a relatively stable family, her personal life had been turbulent. The young marriage ended, leaving her to raise her children alone. She juggled multiple jobs to support her family, and helped care for her grandchildren. Known for her commanding presence, Linda demanded loyalty and control, tolerating no betrayal. Despite her strength, she yearned for personal happiness. Their meeting was serendipitous, perhaps through mutual acquaintances. At first, Linda dismissed Nathaniel, a man 20 years her junior with a volatile past. But his confidence, persistence, and dangerous charisma drew her in. For Nathaniel, Linda offered stability, shelter, and emotional support. For Linda, he was a thrilling departure from her routine, someone she felt she could mold. Their relationship blossomed quickly, defying their differences. They moved in together, and soon Linda's children and grandchildren shared the cramped household. The home was far from harmonious. Tension simmered beneath the surface. Neighbors noticed frequent arguments, with Nathaniel's short temper clashing against Linda's need for control. No one could have foreseen how far this discord would escalate. Nathaniel's obsession with firearms grew unchecked. Ignoring his legal ban, he acquired handguns and rifles through shady deals and legal loopholes. He reveled in his arsenal, spending hours discussing calibers, mechanisms, and modifications, or simply admiring his collection. Firearms became integral to his identity. He carried a handgun at home, often tinkering with it at the kitchen table. His careless handling, leaving weapons in plain sight, unsettled those around him. At first, Linda turned a blind eye, unconcerned as long as Nathaniel contributed financially. She ignored the illegality of his business, avoiding questions about his dealings. But his behavior grew erratic. He'd lash out over trivial matters, a wrong look, a misplaced word, his temper flaring and subsiding with unnerving speed. Christina, one of Linda's daughters, was the first to voice alarm. She saw Nathaniel for what he was, not just abrasive, but dangerous. His boasts about aggression, his need for dominance, and his volatile reactions chilled her. During one argument, she watched him clench his fist, knuckles whitening, and knew he was capable of crossing a line. The household's atmosphere grew oppressive, fear Nathaniel's unpredictability seeping into daily life. Yet this was only the beginning. By 2021, Nathaniel and Linda had cohabited for 6 years. On the surface, their life seemed stable, but their relationship had eroded. Nathaniel, never faithful, made affairs routine. He connected with women via social media, engaging in fleeting relationships, then moving on. Secret conversations became habitual. He used messaging apps, hid contacts, and meticulously deleted chats. He'd slip out at night, claiming work or personal errands, returning in the early hours without explanation. Confident in his control, he believed Linda was either oblivious or powerless to act. He underestimated her. Initially, Linda ignored Nathaniel's subtle changes, frequent absences, constant texting, a sudden focus on his appearance. But suspicion took root. Her patience snapped when she glimpsed a message on his phone, undeniable proof of infidelity. Rather than confront him, Linda chose strategy over impulse. She began surveilling him, checking messages, analyzing habits, and detecting lies. Each discovery fueled her anger. Betrayal was anathema to her. She refused to be another discarded woman. She faced a choice: leave Nathaniel or make him regret his actions. Linda opted for retribution, not through a dramatic scene but a calculated plan to render his life unbearable. Linda's revenge began with deception. She created fake social media profiles, using photos of strangers and crafting believable personas, seductive women, shadowy criminals, anonymous threats. Studying online scams, she mastered manipulation tactics, building a network of fictional characters to ensnare Nathaniel. She delved into the underworld, researching mafia tactics, cartel hierarchies, and psychological intimidation. Her most potent weapon was information control, tracking locations, accessing contacts, monitoring conversations. Armed with this knowledge, she launched her campaign. Posing as a mysterious woman, Linda contacted Nathaniel. He took the bait, unaware of the trap. After casual chats, she dropped hints about his past, unsettling him. Then she escalated, sending his real-time location, planting seeds of paranoia. Nathaniel grew nervous, but Linda pressed on, introducing more personas: Bulgarian mafia, cartel enforcers, hitmen, each with motives and demands. Some threatened, others offered protection, creating a disorienting web of fear. Nathaniel struggled to make sense of it, his behavior shifting. He became hypervigilant, checking for tails, avoiding unknown calls, and asking Linda to drive him to obscure locations. He changed passwords, deleted messages, and tried to outmaneuver his pursuers, unaware the threat was illusory. In May 2023, Nathaniel met Zara, a colleague at his new job. Married with 2 children, Zara was unhappy in her marriage, with a history of infidelity. Their connection sparked with glances and flirtations, quickly deepening. Nathaniel, disillusioned with Linda, found excitement in Zara. They professed love, dreaming of a shared future. Linda, ever watchful, noticed the shift. Initially dismissive, she soon realized this affair was different. Reading their messages, she felt humiliated. Months of orchestrating Nathaniel's fear had failed to curb his betrayal. Her anger turned to resolve. Nathaniel would pay. Linda intensified her psychological assault, introducing menacing threats warning Nathaniel to end his affair with Zara. But he was desensitized, emboldened by his feelings for her. Linda shifted tactics, targeting Zara's husband, Alberto, with cryptic messages and photos hinting at infidelity. When that faltered, she sent anonymous letters threatening his family's safety. The pressure worked. Alberto grew paranoid, sensing danger beyond marital strife. Still, Nathaniel clung to Zara. Linda struck at his trust, convincing him Zara was a mafia operative using him. Fabricated informants fed him lies, suggesting Zara's presence was no coincidence. Nathaniel, worn down, began to believe her, seeing patterns in the chaos. Linda demanded proof of his loyalty, pushing him toward eliminating Zara. Exhausted and manipulated, Nathaniel complied, planning the crime with chilling precision. He studied Zara's routines, mapped escape routes, and gathered supplies, gloves, tape, a flashlight. Linda played the silent advisor, reinforcing his resolve. On the night of the attack, she drove him to Zara's house, feigning ignorance. Nathaniel broke in through a window, waking Alberto. Shots rang out, missing him. Alberto ran to protect his family, but Nathaniel gunned him down in the hallway. Zara and her children barricaded themselves, but Nathaniel shot through the door, killing her. He staged a robbery, scattering items, then fled to Linda's waiting car. They drove off in silence. Neighbors' 4 a.m. call brought police to the scene. The staged robbery fooled no one. Nothing valuable was taken, and evidence pointed to intent. Colleagues revealed Nathaniel and Zara's affair, making him a prime suspect. His criminal history and firearm obsession sealed his fate. Linda continued her charade, messaging Nathaniel as the mafia, assuring him of protection. But the investigation uncovered the fake accounts, raising doubts about the threat's authenticity. Nathaniel, sensing the closing net, sought his mother's help, begging to flee. She refused, fearing complicity. Days later, surveillance caught Nathaniel and Linda at a grocery store. A high-speed chase ensued, Nathaniel driving recklessly, Linda calm beside him. He swerved, crashing violently. Police found Nathaniel dead, a gun in hand, and Linda lifeless. He had shot her before himself. Whether he realized her deception in those final moments remained unknown. Forensic analysis of Linda's devices revealed her orchestration, fake accounts, surveillance tools, and a year-long manipulation. What seemed like jealousy was a chilling psychological game. Linda's quest for control led to her own demise, her illusion consuming them both. The case closed, but questions lingered. Did Nathaniel uncover the truth, or die believing in a fabricated war? The only certainty was the devastating power of a lie, capable of destroying from within. In the bustling city of Jakarta, Indonesia, a tale of friendship, betrayal, and chilling calculation unfolded, captivating a nation and leaving a permanent mark on those involved. This is the story of Jessica Wongso, a woman from a life of privilege whose actions led to a tragedy that shocked Indonesia. On January 6, 2016, a single sip of coffee became the catalyst for a case that will be dubbed the trial of the century, exposing the dark undercurrents beneath wealth and camaraderie. Jessica Wongso was born in 1988 into an extraordinarily affluent family in Jakarta. The youngest of three children to Imelda and Winardi Wongso, she was raised in the lap of luxury. Her family owned a major company that dominated Indonesia's plastic import industry, earning her father the moniker Plastic King. In a country where the average daily income hovered around $4, the Wongsos lived among the elite, their wealth a stark contrast to the poverty surrounding them. Jessica, indulged from childhood, wanted for nothing. Her every whim was met with extravagance. In 2005, when Jessica was 17, her parents relocated to Sydney, Australia, the primary market for their business. They purchased a lavish home in Double Bay, one of Sydney's most exclusive neighborhoods, where even a small plot of land cost millions. Her father acquired 2 adjacent plots for a sprawling residence. Curiously, Jessica remained in Jakarta to complete high school, living under the care of dozens of staff and servants employed by her family. From a young age, she displayed a passion for video games and a remarkable talent for painting, often losing herself in drawing for hours. This creative spark led her to pursue graphic design after graduating high school in 2007. She joined her family in Sydney and enrolled at the Billy Blue College of Design. In Sydney, Jessica's life was vibrant but solitary in some ways. Her siblings, also in Australia, led separate lives, rarely crossing paths with her. At college, she threw herself into university life, forming friendships that brought out her lively, playful side. Her peers described her as the life of the party, a silly and joyful presence who brightened any gathering. It was here that she met Myrna Salihin, another Indonesian student from a similarly wealthy Jakarta family. Myrna's father, Eddie Salaman, was a successful businessman, and she had a twin sister, Sandy, and a long-term boyfriend, Arif, studying in Melbourne while Myrna was in Sydney. The two women bonded quickly over their shared elite status, love for design, and independent spirits. Despite their similarities, they were distinct. Jessica was outspoken, craving attention, while Myrna was shy, preferring simplicity and a close-knit family life. Jessica and Myrna's university years were filled with memories, often spent with 2 other Jakarta-born classmates, Hani and Vera, also from affluent families. They partied, explored Sydney, and forged bonds that seemed unbreakable. Time passed swiftly, and graduation arrived. Myrna returned to Jakarta with Arif, while Jessica stayed in Australia with her family. By June 2015, when Myrna visited Sydney for a holiday, their lives had diverged significantly. Myrna planned to reconnect with university friends and explore the harbor city. She reached out to Jessica, arranging a dinner to catch up. 4 years had passed since graduation, and their paths had taken different turns. Myrna's life was blossoming. Newly engaged to Arif, she was planning a dream wedding, her happiness palpable. Jessica, however, was struggling. Working in New South Wales, she was in a turbulent relationship with her boyfriend, Patrick. Their frequent arguments, compounded by Jessica's claims of his substance abuse and violent tendencies, had taken a toll. Once the effervescent center of attention, Jessica was now battling depression, her demeanor marked by negativity. Over dinner, Myrna, ever straightforward, urged Jessica to leave Patrick, warning that he was dragging her down. Jessica's response was chilling. She fell silent, her face unreadable. Without a word, she stood abruptly and left Myrna alone at the restaurant, the air thick with unspoken tension. Myrna was shaken by the encounter. Back in Jakarta, she confided in Arif, vowing to meet Jessica only if others were present. The awkward exchange seemed to sever their already fraying friendship. Arif advised her not to dwell on it, noting their distance. Jessica in Sydney, Myrna in Jakarta, and their dwindling mutual connections. In November 2015, Myrna and Arif celebrated a fairy tale wedding in Bali, a joyous occasion attended by friends and family, save for Jessica. While Myrna's life seemed draped in rose petals, Jessica's was unraveling. In August 2015, Jessica's downward spiral became public. At 2 a.m., intoxicated, she crashed her Audi A3 into a nursing home, smashing through a brick wall near the residents' sleeping quarters. Miraculously, no one was injured, but the chaos woke the entire facility. Jessica, sustaining minor injuries, was hospitalized, her car totaled. This wasn't her first brush with crisis that year. She had been hospitalized 5 times, each incident tied to her stated desire to end her life. Police and ambulances became frequent visitors to her home, often arriving just as Patrick intervened. By November, Patrick had reached his breaking point. He sought a restraining order, citing thousands of threatening messages from Jessica, who vowed to kill them both if he left. She harassed his friends and family, leaving Patrick exhausted and fearing for his safety. Jessica's professional life crumbled too. Her erratic behavior and alcohol dependency led to her termination. Furious, she sent death threats to her manager and the manager's mother, chillingly claiming she knew precisely how to kill someone. With her boyfriend gone, her job lost, and her sense of self eroding, Jessica decided to return to Jakarta in early December 2015. To those around her, it seemed a chance for a fresh start. But her motives were far darker. In Jakarta, Jessica formed a WhatsApp group with Hani and Myrna. Myrna, still stung from their Sydney encounter, was hesitant to respond, but Jessica's pleas and Hani's involvement softened her stance. Jessica eagerly offered to treat them to drinks, promising to handle reservations. She asked their drink preferences. Myrna mentioned Vietnamese iced coffee, but said she'd order it herself. They agreed to meet at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, January 6, 2016, at Olivier Coffee, a luxurious cafe in the Grand Indonesia Shopping Center. Jessica arrived at 3:30 p.m., 90 minutes early, pacing the cafe and studying its layout. She was meticulously noting the positions of security cameras, eventually selecting table 54, a secluded spot by the wall, partially obscured from view. At 4:15 p.m., she returned with 3 shopping bags from the body shop, claiming they contained soaps for her friends. She arranged the bags on the table, subtly positioning them to block the camera's line of sight. Approaching the bar, she ordered 3 drinks, 2 cocktails and a Vietnamese iced coffee, paying in advance. When the server delivered them, Jessica ensured they were placed behind the bags. After the server left, she shifted her seat. Though the camera footage was blurry, her hand movements suggested she was tampering with the coffee. She then tucked the bags behind her chair and waited. Myrna and Hani arrived at 5:15 p.m., 15 minutes late. The drinks had been sitting for over 45 minutes. Jessica greeted them warmly, though Myrna's body language betrayed her unease. Seated between Jessica and Hani, Myrna was urged by Jessica to try the coffee. Trusting her friend, Myrna took a sip and instantly knew something was wrong. She waved her hands frantically, telling Hani, "This coffee tastes horrific." The drink remained nearly untouched, but that single sip was fatal. Within a minute, Myrna's head snapped back, her body convulsing as she vomited foam. She collapsed to the floor, chaos erupting around her. Servers and the manager rushed to help. Hani, hysterical, tried to rouse Myrna, who was unresponsive. The manager called for an ambulance and oxygen tanks as patrons watched in horror. Hani's screams filled the air, but Jessica stood eerily calm, her expression blank. The manager, initially suspecting an epileptic seizure, was stunned when Jessica glared at her and snapped, "What did you guys put in the coffee?" Offended by the accusation, the manager instructed staff to seal the coffee cup as evidence, a decision that would prove pivotal. Hani called Arif, sobbing that Myrna was seizing and foaming at the mouth. Arif raced to the hospital, but by his arrival at 6:30 p.m., Myrna had passed away. Doctors had fought to save her, but it was too late. Arif was shattered. Just 2 months earlier, he and Myrna had married, their future brimming with plans. That afternoon, he had kissed her goodbye. Now she was gone, their dreams reduced to ashes. Myrna's family and friends were reeling, unable to fathom how a healthy 27-year-old could die so suddenly, mere weeks after her dream wedding. At her funeral, Jessica's behavior raised eyebrows. Irritated and tearless, she stood apart, her demeanor fueling whispers. Why had she insisted Myrna drink the coffee? Why order it 45 minutes early? Why choose a table hidden from one camera, with bags blocking another? Surveillance footage later showed Jessica standing aloof during the chaos, scratching her thigh, an itch toxicologists speculated could stem from cyanide contact. When asked to surrender her trousers for examination, she claimed she discarded them because Myrna had vomited on them. Yet footage showed she never approached Myrna post-collapse, remaining detached, offering no aid. The manager's foresight in preserving the coffee cup provided critical evidence. 3 days later, tests confirmed it contained a lethal dose of cyanide. Indonesia's predominantly Muslim culture often discourages autopsies, requiring family consent in criminal cases. Myrna's family initially resisted, reluctant to disturb her body. Investigators, assuring utmost care, persuaded them to allow limited sampling. On January 9, 2016, a partial autopsy revealed cyanide in Myrna's stomach, with bleeding consistent with poisoning, though no traces appeared elsewhere. The coffee cup, laced with cyanide, was the murder weapon. How Jessica obtained cyanide remained a mystery. Legally acquiring it was difficult, but her intelligence suggested she could have sourced it on the black market, though police found no evidence. The case gripped Indonesia, unfolding like a blockbuster thriller. Social media spread the footage, with public opinion pointing to Jessica. Speculation abounded. Was she in love with Myrna, seeking revenge after a marriage? Was she bitter over not being invited to the wedding? Arif believed Jessica was upset over Myrna's advice to leave Patrick. Sandy, Myrna's sister, posited jealousy, envy of Myrna's loving husband, family, and friends. Yet the true motive remained locked in Jessica's mind. Indonesian police, collaborating with Australian authorities, accessed Jessica's criminal record, agreeing to forego the death penalty per Australia's laws. Her Sydney record was damning: 13 reports, including threats, DUIs, and Patrick's restraining order. On June 15, 2016, the trial began at Jakarta's Central Court. Jessica appeared radiant, smiling broadly, waving at the press as if reveling in the spotlight. Her wealthy family hired over 15 top lawyers, who argued that minimal cyanide in Myrna's stomach could be post-mortem, and an undiagnosed illness might explain her death, given the limited autopsy. On October 5, 2016, the courtroom brimmed with anticipation. The jury delivered a guilty verdict, sentencing Jessica to 20 years in prison. Applause and relief swept the room. The Australian agreement spared her execution. For Indonesians, the case highlighted that wealth didn't guarantee happiness. Vietnamese iced coffee surged in popularity, but it carried a dark legacy no one wished to recall. In 2017, one of the most infamous criminal cases in American history resurfaced, drawing renewed attention to a man whose name had become synonymous with terror: David Kaczynski, known to the world as the Unabomber. While his crimes originated decades earlier, fresh investigations into his motives and ideology reignited public fascination. Living a reclusive life in a remote Montana cabin, Kaczynski's quiet demeanor belied the violent extremism that drove one of the most chilling bombing campaigns in the United States. From 1978 to 1995, he orchestrated a series of attacks that left a trail of devastation, targeting those he blamed for society's technological overreach. This is the story of a brilliant mind consumed by radical beliefs, whose actions forced a nation to confront the dangers of unchecked ideology. David Kaczynski was born in Chicago, Illinois, into an affluent, highly educated family. From an early age, he displayed remarkable intelligence, particularly in mathematics and science. Yet, beneath his academic prowess lay a tendency towards social isolation. Raised in a household where emotional expression was often stifled, Kaczynski struggled to form deep connections, fostering a sense of detachment that would shape his later years. He excelled academically, earning a place at Harvard University, where he was exposed to rigorous intellectual environments and philosophical ideas. However, his time at Harvard was marked by intense pressure and a growing sense of alienation from peers, amplifying his frustration with the world around him. Despite his academic success, including a promising career in mathematics and philosophy, Kaczynski became increasingly disillusioned with modern society, which he viewed as corrupt and destructive, driven by rampant industrialization and technological progress. By the 1970s, Kaczynski's resentment had solidified into a radical ideology. He believed that technology was eroding human freedom, enslaving society to systems that prioritized efficiency over autonomy. This conviction led him to abandon conventional life, retreating to a secluded cabin in the woods of Montana, where he lived a minimalist existence, far from the trappings of modernity. Yet, beneath this solitary facade, he was plotting a campaign of terror that would span nearly 2 decades, targeting individuals he deemed responsible for society's technological descent. Kaczynski's first known act as the Unabomber occurred in 1978 when he mailed a homemade bomb to a university professor. Disguised as an innocuous package, the device detonated but caused no fatalities, marking the beginning of a calculated reign of terror. Over the next 17 years, he executed 16 bombings, resulting in 3 deaths and 23 injuries. His targets were carefully chosen: university professors, airline executives, scientists, and business leaders, symbols in his mind of the technological and industrial systems he despised. His bombs, meticulously crafted and often disguised as books or parcels, were designed to explode upon opening, making them unpredictable and terrifying. The randomness of the attacks baffled law enforcement, with no clear pattern emerging in the early years. In 1985, the investigation gained traction when a bomb injured a university professor in California. This incident allowed authorities to identify a common thread among the victims: their ties to technological fields or institutions. By 1987, the FBI, involved since the early 1980s, dubbed the perpetrator the Unabomber, reflecting the university-related targets. Despite this breakthrough, Kaczynski remained elusive, his meticulous methods leaving few clues. Investigators theorized that the bomber possessed advanced engineering knowledge, possibly a former academic, but leads were scarce. The bombings continued into the 1990s, each attack fueling Kaczynski's conviction that industrial society was leading humanity toward ruin. He saw himself as a revolutionary, waging war against a world he believed was stripping away freedom and authenticity. Central to Kaczynski's campaign was his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, a 35,000-word treatise he completed in 1995. In it, he articulated his belief that technological progress was a destructive force, undermining human autonomy and chaining society to systems of control. He argued for a return to a pre-industrial way of life, free from the dehumanizing effects of machines and bureaucracy. His ideas, while rooted in a critique of modernity, were steeped in paranoia and a call for radical upheaval. To amplify his message, Kaczynski made a bold demand. He sent letters to major newspapers, including the Washington Post and the New York Times, offering to halt his bombings if they published his manifesto in full. The decision was fraught with ethical dilemmas. Publishing the manifesto could glorify a terrorist agenda. Refusing risked further violence. After intense deliberation, the media agreed, and in September 1995, the manifesto appeared in print. Its publication sparked widespread debate. Some intellectuals found resonance in Kaczynski's critique of technology's societal impact, particularly amid growing concerns about consumerism and environmental degradation. However, the overwhelming response was condemnation, as the manifesto underscored the extremism behind his violent acts. For the public, it was a chilling glimpse into the mind of a man who justified murder to advance his cause. Unbeknownst to Kaczynski, the manifesto's publication became his undoing. His brother, James Kaczynski, recognized the distinctive writing style and ideas, which echoed David's private rants. Though estranged for years, James was haunted by the possibility that his brother was the Unabomber. Torn between loyalty and duty, he contacted the FBI in 1996, providing crucial evidence that led to David's arrest at his Montana cabin. The arrest, after a 17-year manhunt, was a triumph of investigative persistence, combining James's tip, the manifesto's clues, and years of forensic work. Inside the cabin, authorities found bomb-making materials, journals detailing his attacks, and a live bomb ready for mailing, confirming Kaczynski's guilt. The media frenzy surrounding Kaczynski's capture was immense. The public was stunned that a quiet, intellectual recluse could orchestrate such havoc. At his trial in 1998, Kaczynski pleaded guilty to all charges, receiving a life sentence without parole. Housed in a high-security prison, he became a case study in radicalization, prompting experts to dissect the psychological and social factors behind his descent. His upbringing, marked by emotional repression, and his Harvard years, where intellectual rigor clashed with personal isolation, were seen as catalysts. Kaczynski's failure to integrate into the academic world fueled a righteous indignation, convincing him that his insights deserved recognition, even through violence. Kaczynski's victims bore the true cost of his ideology. His bombings, spanning 1978 to 1995, left indelible scars. Among the fatalities were a young advertising executive and a respected professor, each chosen for their roles in fields Kaczynski vilified. Survivors and families endured profound suffering, their lives upended by random acts of terror. Kaczynski saw his targets as faceless cogs in a technological machine, but they were individuals with dreams, families, and futures stolen by his bombs. The human toll underscored the brutality of his campaign, a stark contrast to the philosophical veneer of his manifesto. By 2017, Kaczynski's case saw a resurgence of interest. New documentaries, books, and articles explored his life, ideology, and the societal anxieties he exploited. His warnings about technology's dehumanizing effects resonated in an era grappling with artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and environmental crises. Yet his resort to violence served as a cautionary tale, highlighting the perils of extremist responses to legitimate concerns. Some sympathized with his critique, seeing parallels in modern debates about digital dependency, but his methods, murder and mayhem, set him apart, branding him a dangerous radical. Kaczynski's arrest in 1996 closed a harrowing chapter, but it opened broader questions about ideology, mental health, and the ethics of progress. His manifesto, while prescient in parts, was a product of paranoia and rage, offering no solutions, only destruction. The FBI's painstaking efforts, culminating in James's agonizing decision, ended a terror campaign that had gripped the nation. Yet Kaczynski's legacy endured, not as a revolutionary, but as a symbol of the dark intersection of radical thought and violence. In prison, Kaczynski remained unrepentant, his days of activism confined to letters and writings. His case continued to provoke discussion, serving as a lens for examining the tensions of a rapidly changing world. The Unabomber's story was more than that of a disturbed individual. It was a reflection of society's struggles with technology's pace and the ethical dilemmas it posed. His actions, spanning nearly 2 decades, left a chilling reminder. The most dangerous ideas are those wielded with unyielding conviction, capable of igniting chaos and shattering lives. In 2012, one of the most notorious and profoundly tragic criminal cases in recent memory unfolded in Aurora, Colorado. The case centered on James Egan Holmes, a 24-year-old former neuroscience graduate student who would become infamous as the perpetrator of the Aurora theater shooting, one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. Holmes, once described as intelligent and promising, carried out a meticulously planned and horrific attack during a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises, leaving 12 dead and 70 injured. The sheer brutality of the act, committed by a man who had blended seamlessly into society, stunned the nation and left an indelible scar on the Aurora community. James Holmes was born on December 13, 1987, in San Diego, California, and raised in a suburban middle-class family. As a child, he was often described as bright and academically gifted, excelling in his studies with an aptitude that hinted at a promising future. Yet, it was his unassuming nature, his quiet, calm demeanor, and ability to blend into the background that would later make his descent into violence so chilling. Holmes had no prior criminal record, no history of violent behavior, and no outward signs that he was capable of such an atrocity. To those who knew him, he was an enigma, a seemingly ordinary individual whose actions would defy comprehension. Holmes attended the University of Colorado, where he pursued a PhD in neuroscience. During his time there, he was known as a reserved and solitary figure, though his academic work was regarded as highly capable. Despite his intellectual promise, Holmes' personal life began to unravel. He grew increasingly isolated, withdrawing from friends, family, and colleagues. His academic performance faltered, and he struggled to maintain the rigor of his graduate program. By the time of the shooting, Holmes had dropped out of the university, grappling with a cascade of personal and psychological challenges. Friends and acquaintances later recalled subtle but troubling changes in his behavior, signs of depression, paranoia, and a growing detachment from reality. Though he had once been a driven student, something dark and unsettling was brewing beneath the surface. The fact that Holmes chose a public venue for his crime amplified the terror and unpredictability of his actions. This was not a spontaneous act of rage or a crime of passion. It was a coldly calculated massacre. On the night of July 20, 2012, Holmes attended the midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises, a film that had sparked widespread excitement. As the movie began, he sat among the audience, indistinguishable from the eager moviegoers around him. At some point, he slipped out of the theater, donned protective gear, and re-entered through a side exit, armed with an arsenal that included a rifle, a shotgun, and 2 handguns. Without warning, he opened fire on the unsuspecting crowd. The attack was swift and brutal. The theater, filled with fans anticipating a thrilling cinematic experience, descended into chaos as Holmes fired indiscriminately. He deployed smoke canisters to obscure visibility, sowing panic and confusion. The rapid gunfire left little time for victims to react. Some were struck before they could flee, while others, paralyzed by fear, played dead in hopes of survival. Those who managed to escape did so in a frenzy, many sustaining horrific injuries as they scrambled for safety. The scene was one of unimaginable horror, with the sounds of gunfire, screams, and shattering glass piercing the air. By the time police and emergency services arrived, the damage was done. 12 lives were lost, and dozens more were wounded, some with injuries that would alter their lives forever. Holmes' depravity extended beyond the theater. Investigations later revealed that he had rigged his apartment with explosives, intending to harm law enforcement and emergency personnel who might investigate the scene. Fortunately, authorities discovered the booby traps before they could be triggered, averting further tragedy. These chilling details underscored the extent of Holmes' premeditation. He had not only planned the massacre with precision, but had taken steps to maximize its destructive impact, targeting not just the theatergoers but anyone who might respond to the aftermath. The aftermath of the shooting was devastating. The victims, many of whom were young adults simply enjoying a night out, left behind grieving families and friends struggling to make sense of the senseless. The 12 fatalities included men and women, some of whom died heroically while shielding loved ones or helping others escape. The 70 injured bore physical and emotional scars, with many facing lifelong disabilities. The Aurora community was shattered, its sense of safety irrevocably altered. For survivors, the trauma of that night would linger, manifesting in nightmares, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of loss. Holmes' motives remained elusive, deepening the tragedy's mystery. He had no personal vendetta against his victims, no clear ideological agenda, and no prior history of violence. Yet, in the months leading up to the attack, his mental state had visibly deteriorated. Reports indicated that he had become consumed by dark thoughts, exhibiting signs of depression, paranoia, and social withdrawal. Holmes had even sought help from mental health professionals, though these efforts failed to prevent the tragedy. His descent into violence highlighted critical gaps in the systems designed to identify and support individuals at risk of harming themselves or others. Investigations revealed that Holmes had been planning the massacre for months. He had researched previous mass shootings, drawing inspiration from their tactics and refining his own strategy. He legally purchased firearms, ammunition, and explosives, amassing an arsenal with chilling efficiency. His meticulous preparation extended to his choice of target, a crowded theater during a high-profile movie premiere, and his use of protective gear to prolong his attack. Disturbingly, Holmes' obsession with violent imagery, particularly the Batman villain the Joker, appeared to fuel his psychological descent. He dyed his hair orange and referred to himself as the Joker, embracing a twisted persona that seemed to blend delusion with a desire for infamy. The question of why Holmes committed such an atrocity consumed public discourse. Was he driven by untreated mental illness, or did his actions reflect a calculated quest for notoriety? Some experts suggested that Holmes' increasing alienation, coupled with a distorted perception of reality, had pushed him toward violence. Others argued that his meticulous planning and desire for media attention pointed to a conscious intent to create chaos. The media frenzy that followed the shooting only amplified these questions, as Holmes became a focal point of national attention, his image plastered across headlines and television screens. Holmes was arrested moments after the shooting, seated calmly in his car outside the theater. When approached by police, he reportedly said, "I am the shooter," offering no resistance or explanation. His eerie composure stood in stark contrast to the carnage he had unleashed, raising further questions about his mental state. Held in solitary confinement at the Arapahoe County Jail, Holmes underwent extensive psychological evaluations to determine his competency to stand trial. These assessments would play a pivotal role in the legal proceedings, as his defense team argued that he suffered from severe mental illness, specifically schizophrenia, which had driven his actions. The defense painted a portrait of a man unraveling under the weight of mental illness. They described Holmes' increasing isolation, erratic behavior, and disturbing thoughts in the months leading up to the attack. Classmates and professors recalled his withdrawal from academic and social life, noting that he had become creepy or weird in ways that, in hindsight, were alarming. Emails and online activity revealed a fixation on violence, with Holmes expressing dark fantasies that hinted at his intentions. Yet, no one had foreseen the scale of the violence he would unleash. The defense argued that Holmes' schizophrenia caused delusions and hallucinations, convincing him that his actions were justified or controlled by external forces. In contrast, the prosecution maintained that Holmes was a calculating killer who knew exactly what he was doing. They emphasized the months of preparation, from his research into mass shootings to his careful acquisition of weapons and explosives. The booby-trap department, the choice of a crowded theater, and the timing of the attack all pointed to a deliberate intent to maximize harm. The prosecution argued that Holmes' obsession with infamy, inspired by figures like the Joker and past mass shooters, drove him to orchestrate a spectacle of violence. They rejected the notion that his mental illness absolved him of responsibility, asserting that he was fully aware of the consequences of his actions. The trial, which began in 2015, was a grueling and highly publicized ordeal. Over 3 years after the shooting, victims and survivors were forced to relive the trauma as they testified about the horrors of that night. Families mourned loved ones lost, while survivors grappled with physical disabilities, PTSD, and survivor's guilt. Holmes remained largely silent throughout the proceedings, his cold and detached demeanor adding to the sense of unease. The trial sparked broader debates about gun control, mental health care, and the societal factors that enable such acts of violence. Central to the trial was the question of Holmes' mental state. The defense's insanity plea hinged on his alleged schizophrenia, supported by expert testimony about his delusions and erratic behavior. They argued that Holmes was not in control of his actions, driven by a fractured mind that rendered him unable to distinguish right from wrong. The prosecution countered that his premeditation, evident in his research, planning, and execution, demonstrated a clear understanding of his actions. They pointed to his study of the Columbine High School shooting, which occurred nearby, as evidence of his intent to emulate and surpass previous atrocities. In the end, the jury rejected the insanity defense, finding Holmes guilty of 24 counts of first-degree murder and 140 counts of attempted murder. They concluded that, despite any mental health struggles, he had acted with deliberate intent. Sentenced to life in prison without parole, Holmes would spend the rest of his days incarcerated. For the victims' families and survivors, the verdict offered a measure of justice, but it could not erase the pain of their loss. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a legal chapter, but the emotional and societal wounds remained raw. The Aurora Theater shooting left a lasting impact on the United States, igniting debates about gun violence, mental health care, and public safety. The tragedy exposed vulnerabilities in mental health systems, as Holmes' cries for help had gone unheeded. It also fueled calls for stricter gun laws, with survivors advocating for background checks and restrictions on assault weapons. Yet, political divisions and lobbying efforts slowed legislative progress, leaving many frustrated by the lack of meaningful change. For the Aurora community, the shooting was a defining moment. Movie theaters, once havens of entertainment, became symbols of vulnerability. Survivors faced ongoing struggles with trauma, depression, and anxiety, while families mourned loved ones lost to a senseless act. Many found purpose in advocacy, sharing their stories to highlight the human cost of gun violence. Community outreach programs, counseling, and memorials offered some solace, but the scars of that night would never fully heal. James Holmes' transformation from a promising student to a mass murderer remains a haunting mystery. His actions, driven by a toxic blend of mental illness, alienation, and a desire for infamy, shattered lives and exposed societal failings. The Aurora Theater shooting stands as a grim reminder of the consequences of unchecked mental health crises and easy access to weapons. It is a story of unimaginable loss, resilience in the face of tragedy, and a nation still grappling with the root causes of violence. For the victims, their families, and the city of Aurora, the pain of that night endures, a wound that time may never fully mend.